Good afternoon. Aloha, everyone. My name is Chuck Parker. I'm the VP of Content here at PBS Hawaiʻi. I want to thank you for joining this afternoon for this exclusive event featuring an online sneak preview of the PBS Hawaiʻi Presents film Removed by Force, the eviction of Hawaii's Japanese Americans during World War II. The film you just watched will premiere on broadcast Thursday. That's the 28th of September, Thursday night at 8:30 p.m. right here on PBS Hawaiʻi. And then the film will be shown intermittently for the next 3 years, include a digital component, meaning the pbshawaii.org, our website, starting in early 2024. On your screen, you might see a QR code. Please consider a gift to PBS Hawaiʻi. Thanks to viewers like you, we can continue to provide these events like this free virtual screening for programs, wonderful programs like these. And before we get started too far along, I want to acknowledge the areas some of you folks are watching from, Manoa, Kaneohe here on Oahu, the Big Island, Hakalau, and Waimea. Well, I think it's Waimea, Big Island, could be Kauai. And there's also folks joining us from Portland, Oregon, New Hampshire, and Alameda, California, even as far away as Pennsylvania. So thank you all for taking the time. We appreciate that. So joining me this afternoon for our Q&A is Bill Kaneko, executive producer, also Ryan Kawamoto, co-executive producer, writer, director, and editor of the film you folks just watched. And I personally want to thank both Bill and Ryan for taking the time to be here today, but also for taking the time and making the effort to make this wonderful film. And so I want to just throw out a question. We'll start with you, Bill. So what inspired you to make this film?
Great. Thanks, Chuck and PBS, for the opportunity to air Removed by Force. What inspired Ryan and I? Well, I was the president of the Japanese American Citizens League Honolulu chapter some 30 years ago. And we were the nonprofit civil rights organization that spearheaded the redress process for AJAs evicted during the war. And as a result of that experience, then going to law school, I wrote a law school paper on the unlawful evictions. And over the years, it's been some 25 years later, the book is forthcoming, did research, did interviews, did a whole series of research and put together a manuscript that led to the ultimate production in this incredible documentary that Ryan Kawamoto produced. So it's been a long, arduous, but very rewarding experience to put this documentary together with Ryan.
Yeah, and just so you folks know, Ryan is a veteran filmmaker. He's made some other really wonderful films, particularly on this overall topic of what happened during World War II with Japanese Americans. So Ryan, just your thoughts quickly on making this film.
You know, this story first came to my attention about a dozen years ago when I was working on another documentary called The Untold Story, The Internment of Japanese Americans in Hawaii, which also aired on PBS Hawaiʻi a good 10 years ago or so. As we were working on this film, that's when I first learned about the story of those who were removed by force. We had a short chapter in that film with Bill Kaneko, and that's when I first caught wind of it. And so flash forward about 10 years, and Bill, calls me up and he's like, okay, manuscript's almost done. I think we got to make this documentary. And off we went, and this happened like right around the time of the pandemic. We decided, okay, we're gonna move forward with it.
Well, congrats. I'm glad you folks hooked up for that. But I have a bunch of questions, but I'll also honor questions from our viewers here. So this is from Karina. Will this film be available for school teachers, on the mainland? Such an important story.
Ryan, you want to take that?
Well, I can say right now we are developing curriculum. Actually, when I say we, there are some volunteer former educators and other volunteers that are working on a curriculum based on this film. So there'll be a shorter version of this film that's designed for the classroom. There'll be lesson plans. So stay tuned. It will be forthcoming.
Hey, this is from Elisa. She says, I'm a PhD student, studying Japanese incarceration. Mahalo nui loa to this for this amazing contribution. Is there a way I can rewatch and refer to this resource cited in my studies? Well, first off, I'll say you can rewatch it Thursday night at 8:30 p.m. right here on PBS Hawaii. But beyond that, we are going to run it again intermittently over several years. But do you folks have any another answer for Elisa's how it can be rewatched and referred to as a resource?
Yeah, in addition to the documentary, I think I'd mentioned I'm probably about 98% done with the manuscript. It's going to go to a publisher soon. So hopefully within the next 4 to 5 months, there'll be an actual book about the unlawful evictions, which scans everything from the eviction itself. We had access to thousands of pages of wartime documents that are included in the book, the whole experience of working with the Department of Justice, but it outlines pretty much soup to nuts in terms of not only the historical events of the war, but also some of the legal arguments that ultimately led to redress for about 1,500 claimants throughout the state.
Well, thank you for that, Bill. At least I hope that answered your question there. I have a question that talk about possibly around any challenges you had during the production of the film, and including, I'm curious, is how did you find some of these individuals who were featured, in the film?
Yeah, one of the major challenges is we really wanted to find firsthand accounts of what happened during the war, and to find people who are willing to speak on camera and that were, still with us was very, very challenging. Some of the people we tried to locate, Bill and I, literally, we sent letters, we tracked them down through the internet, we tried to call them, and there's a bunch that we just couldn't get a hold of. But we were lucky enough to have several in the film. One of them, like the Ueda shoe store, Bill went to the Ueda shoe store family and just said, "Hey, this is what we're doing." And lo and behold, 105-year-old Kazue Ueda and her daughters were willing to talk. So we scored with that. On the flip side, we were showing another documentary about World War II incarceration right here on PBS Hawaii this past year, earlier in the year, or was actually it was last year, excuse me, called Voices Behind Barbed Wire. And my auntie texts me out of the blue, says, "Hey, I got a friend, and her mom has a really interesting story of what happened to her during World War II. Would you like to hear it?" And I said, "Sure." And I come to find out that she is one of those that was evicted. And I'm like, "Whoa, we've got another one here." So went and pursued that one, and that's Jane Endo, who appears in the film.
So why is telling this story, this film, or making this film so important?
Well, first and foremost, the historic documentation of the event itself, which, as mentioned, I mean, this event did not appear in the congressional hearings that took place. The Commission on Wartime Relocation and Internment of Civilians was a robust effort by Congress to be able to document the impact of the World War II Executive Order 9066 that interned Japanese Americans. Nowhere in that proceedings did the eviction come up. So from a historic standpoint, it's very, very important to gap fill this era in history. But equally and more so is so that this does not happen again, period. I mean, to have documentaries, books, discussions, debates, shows like this that talk about the wartime injustice, so that it's a constant reminder that we need to be vigilant about our civil rights is very, very important to ensure that these kinds of events do not happen again. So um, that's why we should be, viewing this and sharing it with others and remembering this wartime event.
Yes, I agree. Thank you. Thank you for that. Joyce has a question. Will this video be aired on other PBS stations, example on the mainland? She says she has children and grandchildren who now live in California and Virginia, and she'd like very much for them to see the film. So Joyce, the answer at this stage is unknown. That's something that we at here at PBS Hawaii can talk about with Bill and Ryan about making that possible. But I will say that when, as I said earlier, when we're going to broadcast this film intermittently over the next 3 years, and there'll be an online element there. So the film will actually appear on our YouTube page for a 2-week period um, surrounding those broadcast dates. And we don't have those dates yet, but so until there's other information about whether it's going to be on other PBS stations, you will be able to watch it via our YouTube page. And so I guess that means you just have to keep tuning into PBS Hawaiʻi to see when we're going to run those things. So we'll try to get that message out to you folks. I have another question here. Were there any international attempts to identify this as ill treatment or torture? And I guess that goes to the research for the film and the history of what happened. Any international attempts to identify what happened as ill treatment or torture? Did you folks come across any of that during your research?
No, not in particular. A lot of the research was locally based, but we also did um, national research all over the country in terms of the National Archives. There's a San Bruno Military Archives in California. The U.S. Department of Justice pretty much scoured all the major um, uh, resources and researches related to the internment. We did research here locally at the University of Hawaii. So most of our efforts were focused domestically because it was a U.S. domestic um, event that took place.
Very good. As a comment here from Stephen, my wife's family, Tokuda, I'm assuming it's his wife's maiden name, on Oahu, were fortunate they didn't have to endure this unjust treatment. And another question about where this can be seen is from Mary. Can this film be part of PBS Passport? Great question, Mary. We'll work on that. That's not automatic, but that's something we can certainly talk about with the filmmakers here, Bill and Ryan. I want to go on to another question. So what's the most, this is for both you folks here in making the film, what's your most valuable takeaway from this experience in making the film?
I'll start with this one, and then I think Bill, I know Bill has some perspectives on this, but for me, it was just getting people to dialogue about it. I'll give you an example. We had a premiere screening, and we invited all the participants who were in the film. One gentleman, Saxon Nishioka, you remember his story. They had a farm, and the father had that incident with the .22 rifle. Anyway, we bring Saxon up on stage to do a Q&A panel after the premiere screening, which was at the Hawaii Convention Center back in June. And the question was posed to everyone, like, have you shared these events with your families? And Saxon's 50-year-old son yelled out from the audience, "Dad, you never told us any of this and what happened to our family during World War II. This is the first time I'm hearing about it." And which means the first time I'm hearing about it is watching this film on screen with you. So it just shows you the power of the medium, and also just sharing these stories with even your own family.
And why do you think, I mean, any idea after interviewing all these folks, especially folks who were alive back then, why that is? Why the story wasn't shared?
Oh, Bill, do you have any insight from doing interviews with
No, go ahead.
survivors?
Go ahead on that follow-up question. Yeah.
No, I think for some of them it was just really painful, and they just wanted to move on with their lives. They endured it, and they said, "All right, we're gonna move forward," and they just didn't want to talk about it. But it often will take, a film or a book or a public event, and I do notice that this often happens. You'll start to get all these stories coming out, and people willing to share, which is good because, I mean, if we don't share these stories, they're going to be lost forever.
Yeah, and as Bill said earlier, that history could repeat itself, and that's the last thing anybody wants. You folks have done in-person screenings here and there or across the state the last couple months, a few weeks. What's been the reaction from the folks who've come to the screenings and watched it, and then you've talked to them afterwards? What are you hearing from people?
Well, we've been incredibly fortunate to have a lot of support. We've had 3 screenings on Oahu at the Hawaii Convention Center. All 3 were sold out. Ryan and I were on Hilo and Maui over the weekend, all sold out. I understand there's a lot of viewers who are tuned in today on this presentation, and it's going to be on PBS. So there's just been a lot of not only support, but a greater awareness. A lot of people thanking us for doing this documentary. I mean, um, it takes a lot to do something like this, and we're just fortunate that we have folks like Ryan Kawamoto who are trained and skilled filmmakers to be able to have a locally produced film on a local event. I mean, and to have that air, that is very, very unique. So we've been, like I said, Chuck, really, really pleased with the kind of support that the film has gotten so far.
You know, to extend on that, you know, in terms of what it takes to put something like this together. So, for those outside of the TV industry, you know, Ryan hit the nailed it in terms of the length. This film is actually 56 minutes and 46 seconds, which is sort of an odd time, you'd think, but is the desired time for like a that time slot in a PBS station. But to get to 56:46, how much material did you start with, Ryan? After all the interviews and all that you had done, what did you have to go through to get it to that length?
Oh, there was a lot of cut down. I mean, I'm sure we probably have anywhere from 15 to 20 hours worth of interviews. A lot of it hit the cutting room floor, and there were certain areas that we actually could not go into. I think the first cut of this film was probably close to an hour and a half to 2 hours. There were cases and sections, especially some of the later cases, we just couldn't fit in everything. So a lot of it is a summary. I mean, there were 23 geographical areas of Hawaii that you know had Japanese Americans that were removed by force, and a lot of these areas, each one was very, very unique in terms of the scope of it. So we just focused on certain key cases and gave an overview. So unfortunately, yeah, there's actually a lot more that had to hit the cutting room floor.
Yeah, that happens. I want to actually take Bill back for a second. So, Bill, you were um, during the redress process, and when you know the initial uh, redress efforts by the government, and then you started to hear from families about, well, what about us, and these stories started to emerge. Just tell us what you were going through back then. What were you thinking, and how did that make you feel? Is that this, you know, it's the initial effort was, wow, well, look what we did, and then all of a sudden you find out, oh, so much more had been done and so much more injustice had happened, and how did you react to that?
Yeah, that was quite an incredible experience. Because of the initial compensation of persons interned, there was a lot of publicity centered around this. And so as the film depicted, you know, we did get a call from Dr. Donald Kanemaru asking about the eviction cases. Um, but it was really, it was an extremely complex and messy process. The government was totally unprepared to be able to process 1,500 claimants of folks who were not interned. The internment cases were relatively simple, right? You go down the camp roster, if there's a name, then there's compensation. This was totally different. So we had to really develop not only the kinds of legal process to be able to consolidate claims. We had to advocate on behalf of these claimants to the Department of Justice. Um, we had to do the public relations. It was just, you know, there's so many moving parts in all of this, but because of the volunteers, we had a great legal team, a public relations team, a political team that we were able to put everything together and successfully gain redress for the eviction cases.
I have a couple more questions here. I'm not sure that what the answers might be, but I'll just read them to honor the people asking them. Deborah, do you have information about redress for South Americans of Japanese ancestry who interned to the U.S. mainland? Maybe not. That's not quite related to this story. And here's a question. Dr. Billy asking, I would like to ask Ryan if in his research he was able to find background as to how the produce farmers and related entities of Kamuela on Hawaii Island were guarded from incarceration movement. I'm not sure exactly what they're saying there, but you know, I'm wondering if there's still maybe some untold stories, that are out there that because this was so far-reaching.
Yeah, I'll answer the other question. So I don't have any specific information on the, I guess, Kamuela produce farmers. I hadn't come across any stories or accounts of that. For the first part of that question, I am actually familiar with the what happened to those of Latin American Japanese during the war. It's not we didn't research that obviously for this story, but yes, that is a very, very important issue as well, and a story that should also be told as well. But I am familiar
Perhaps,
with it.
perhaps another project on the horizon. That was going to be one of my questions as we got to the end here. I wanted to, was there anything you would do differently in terms of the production? I mean, looking back on it.
I mean, I wish we could have done this, started this film like 10 years ago.
Mhm.
That actually would have helped, but no, I wouldn't have.
Okay. Bill, any thoughts on what you want viewers to take away from watching this film?
Yeah, I think for me, one of the most important lessons was that if you look at the film, um, I had a lot of black hair, was really skinny at the time. I think I was 30 years old. Um, and we were relatively inexperienced. A lot of the legal team was just started their legal careers. And we, as I mentioned earlier, we're doing this kind of by the seat of our pants, making up the process as we went. But having said that, this tiny little young team went head to head with the United States government, and we prevailed. And part of the big lesson to that is that you don't necessarily have to um, be well trained or have that kind of experience to be able to stand up for yourself and for others. You just have to have grit and commitment and fortitude. And that's what we had alongside with the claimants. So Chuck, the to answer your question, I think that one of the lessons was that um, if you're committed and you have the courage, you can do anything. And that is what it's going to take to be able to take strong positions in the community to make sure that everyone is treated equally. If you see something wrong, then address it. But it's that kind of personal courage that we have in all of us that can and should come out when there is injustice.
Well said. Thank you for that. I want to read a couple more comments we got here from some of our viewers. Stephen has a comment. My dad, living with his family in Hauula on Oahu, was 10 years old during the Pearl Harbor attack. I don't think he was aware of any of this happening to his Japanese classmates' families in Kahuku. Richard, what has been done is amazing. Thank you. I do wonder what happened to the properties taken without just compensation. I've heard specific stories in the area of Makai Pearl City near the harbor. Do you folks have an answer to that perhaps? What happened to the properties?
Uh, from from what we could tell is that they, a lot of them rented. They were not property owners at that time. They were displaced. But even property owners here and on the mainland, they basically lost their lands. Very
Yeah.
unfortunate.
Yeah, and a comment here from Ramona. Dr. Ohata was a Nisei doctor who served on D-Day. His father, also a Maui doctor, was imprisoned. His clinic taken, never returned. Dr. Ohata's father was sent back to Japan. So obviously a lot of history, even with the folks who are tuning in today. We're getting close to the end here. I wanted to just go to Bill and then Ryan, just some final thoughts from you folks.
Yeah, I think for me is that share your stories as parents and grandparents because it's important to continue these discussions in our households in our homes. So as our children and our children's children remember that that this did happen and should not happen again. But also, one of the biggest tragedies in the internment and the eviction was the injustice itself by the United States government, but also for the millions of people who stood silently and let it happen. So as citizens, if you, as I mentioned earlier, people innately understood that the Japanese American internment was blatantly wrong. But communities and residents can and should have step to the plate. And I think that's a very, very important lesson in sharing these stories and keeping this alive and having these kinds of programs so that it does bring to light the eviction and what we can do about it in current times.
Yeah, thank you, Ryan.
Yes, and I would like to go back to that prior comment about Dr. Ohata. Um, I actually did a part about Dr. Ohata in the previous documentary, Voices Behind Barbed Wire. So I'm very familiar with their amazing story and what happened to that family on Maui. So they can check that out if they want to see it on the screen. But final thought, I just hope that this film will also not only inspire people to share their stories, but as Bill had mentioned earlier, you know, inspire people to get involved if they see something wrong, to act on it, especially if maybe some of our younger generation to kind of get involved in issues that matter to them or issues that they feel are not right, and to do something about it. Because as this film shows, one person can make a difference, and you don't necessarily need a lot of experience to do it, as you can see with some of the attorneys who worked on the cases. You just need the heart and the determination and the desire to make things better, and that's what really counts.
No, thank you for that. And actually, I'm going to read another comment here before I have my final thought. But this is from Jason, and I think this speaks for everybody here at PBS Hawaii as well. Thank you all for sharing these stories. The more I hear different perspectives, the more I see a common humanity we all share. Well done to all. So this concludes the panel discussion for this afternoon. Thanks to all of you for spending your afternoon with us. Again, we're sorry we didn't get to your question. Apologize for that. PBS Hawaii will be sending around a survey, audience survey through the email to get some feedback on today's event. This helps us continue to improve our screenings going forward. And we love to do these kind of things, especially with local films that have such impacts as this film does. Also on your screen, as I said earlier, the QR code. Please consider a gift to PBS Hawaii. Thanks to all of you, viewers like you, we continue to provide this free virtual screening events like this going forward. To donate, simply scan the code with your phone. It will take you directly to our donate page on our website. So again, the film you saw today, this afternoon, will premiere on broadcast Thursday night, that's the 28th, at 8:30 p.m. on PBS Hawaii. And then going forward, we'll be able to show the film intermittently over the next 3 years or so, and there'll be an online element as well when those showings occur. So on behalf of myself, Chuck Parker here at PBS Hawaii, Bill Kaneko, Ryan Kawamoto, and the rest of my staff here, mahalo and aloha. Good afternoon, everyone.